This is HOSSAM Hosam, and as we know, professional wrestling is built on trust. Rule number 1 is to protect your opponent. But there are certain wrestlers that didn't really live by that rule, and instead of protecting their opponent, they hurt their opponent on purpose. Well, I cannot have today's topic without talking about this. This incident is very well documented. It made mainstream news back in the day and created a lot of controversy around the wrestling business. It was November 23, 1996 at an ECW house show in Massachusetts. A tag team match was supposed to take place where New Jack was supposed to team up with his partner Mustafa Saeed to take on Devon Dudley and Axel Rotten. But for some reason Devon's partner Axel Rotten didn't show up. He didn't make the show, so Paul Heyman, who was the owner of ECW at the time, had to find a replacement, and real quick. Then out of nowhere, here comes this allegedly 21 years old fan to convince Paul Heyman that he was a trained professional wrestler and he was willing to fill in for the spot, and his in-ring name was none other than the Mass Transit. Well, technically he didn't come out of nowhere. That 21 years old guy was attending the show with his father, and somehow he got backstage to Paul Heyman to give him that offer, and Heyman at the time had no choice but to accept that offer. And as they were putting the match backstage, that 21 years old guy, which by the way his real name was Eric Coulis, he was told backstage that he had to bleed during the match, but he has a problem with that, not because he didn't want to do it, because he never done it before and he didn't know how to do it. So he did the biggest mistake of his life. Out of all people, he asked his opponent in the match, New Jack, to do it for him during the match. At this point, everything seems like nothing was out of place, except actually for two problems and two major problems. Everybody, including Paul Heyman, will learn about very late and later that day. Problem number 1, Eric Coulis wasn't a trained professional wrestler, and he didn't only lie about that, he lied about his age. He wasn't 21, he was 17. The match started, and during the match, Devon Dudley and New Jack brawled outside the ring, while Saeed and Mass Transit fought inside the ring. But as things kept going inside and outside of the ring, Devon Dudley was thrown out of the ring and was told by Saeed and New Jack to stay the hell out of the ring and sell their offenses. And of course that left the gangstas with none other than the Mass Transit himself, Eric Coulis. Both of them double-teamed Coulis inside the ring, and then New Jack just went off. He beat the living crap out of him. Coulis was beaten by crutches, a toaster, and when it came to the bleeding spot that they agreed on backstage, New Jack used a surgical scalpel to cut the Mass Transit open. And after that, things went absolutely dark. The cut was much deeper than it should have been. Blood poured from Coulis' head. He lost so much blood that made him lose consciousness. And what even sadder, his father, who was sitting in the front row, was yelling, "Ring the effing bell, he's 17. And as soon as possible, medics rushed into the ring to aid Coulis. Following the incident, the Mass Transit story spread beyond wrestling news, beyond wrestling magazines, making headlines in local and national media. And 3 years later after the incident, New Jack actually went to trial and was sued by Eric Coulis' family on assault charges. However, New Jack was found not guilty after the jury found out that Coulis was the one who asked New Jack to cut him during the match. Before arriving to WWF in 1999, the Public Enemy tag team consisting of Johnny Grunge and Rocco Rock had already made their impact in ECW. In fact, the WWF in 1995 offered them contracts, but they turned it down in favor of signing with the competition at the time, WCW. And after spending nearly 3 years there, they finally made their way to the WWF. But of course, by the time of their arrival, they had a lot of backstage heat due to favoring the competition back in 1995. However, in March 7, 1999, it was an episode of Sunday Night Heat, and a tag team match was scheduled to take place between the Public Enemy and the ABA's Ron Simmons and Bradshaw, JBL. According to JBL, both tag teams agreed on the finish, where Public Enemy was supposed to go through tables at the end of the match. But just before they walked through the curtain, Public Enemy had kind of like change of heart. Before making their entrance, they pulled JBL aside and they told him that they don't want to do the tables spot. JBL was caught off guard. The music is playing and they about to go out, and then Ron Simmons asked JBL what was that about, and JBL told him that they don't want to do the table spot. But Ron wasn't gonna take a no for an answer, and he actually said if they don't want to go through a table, we'll take the table to them. And once the bell rang, the match quickly turned into a legitimate beating. The ABA was laying stiff shots before eventually putting the Public Enemy through a table anyways. But the strangest part about this story, according to JBL, they came backstage after the match. They were expecting to fight, but instead the Public Enemy walked up to them, shook their hand, and thanked them for the match. And speaking of JBL, we cannot leave this story out. In 2005, WWE held an ECW One Night Stand, a reunion show celebrating the OGs of ECW. And of course the main event has to be with the ECW Originals, which was a tag team match, the Dudley Boys taking on the Sandman and Tommy Dreamer. But at the end of that match, everything turned upside down. When a brawl broke out in the ring between the ECW Originals and the WWE guys, it was kinda like an invasion angle. But in the middle of that brawl, something unusual happened. JBL, who was the WWE champion at the time, decided to take an advantage of the situation and how the ring was packed, and decided to shoot on Blue Meanie. It wasn't part of the brawl, it wasn't part of a story. He legitimately assaulted him in the middle of the ring. He punched him straight to the head so many times that got the Blue Meanie busted open. And the big question was, why would JBL attack the Blue Meanie specifically? Short answer, at the time JBL was known backstage for being a bully. But here's a little bit of detail. In an interview, Meanie spoke out about an incident where WWE booked him on a flight in first class. And that didn't really sit well with most of the people in the locker room at the time who have such a huge ego. Actually, on that flight, a lot of people was looking at Meanie like he committed a crime. But he didn't know that it was unwritten rule at the time that he's supposed as a newcomer or someone who's not in the main event scene to give up his seat for a veteran. And there is no doubt that JBL was on that flight. And he also said that in 2000, when he first was released by WWE, he did an interview on a radio show and he stated that JBL was a bully backstage. Well, now you can see where the animosity came from. But following the incident, WWE decided to punish the WWE champion JBL by having him lose to Blue Meanie on an episode of SmackDown. And before the match, JBL and Blue Meanie went backstage and they cleared the air and they put the match together, and afterwards Blue Meanie did take his revenge by beating JBL thanks to the assist of Batista, and of course thanks to Stevie Richards, who delivered one of the stiffest sheer shots ever. It went straight to JBL's head as a receipt for the One Night Stand incident. Well, we talked about backstage bullies and big egos, but for the next 3 stories that we have, allow me to introduce you guys to Hardcore Holly. Hardcore Holly, or Bob Holly, has been always known for his hard-hitting style and old-school mentality, and he had a reputation for being extremely stiff in the ring. Sometimes it actually got way out of hand. In 2004, Rene Dupree, who was 20 years old at the time, he had a phone call with Bob Holly. Holly told him that he was going home to his mother because there was a hurricane in their city, and around that time Rene actually was riding with Holly and Billy Gunn, and that left Rene's with Holly's rental car. So Rene saw it as a chance. He asked Holly to borrow his rental car because he wasn't old enough at the time to rent a car for himself because he was under 25. So Bob Holly saw no problem and he asked Rene just to take care of the car and return it full of gas. 3 months later, Bob Holly was stunned. He found out that he received a parking ticket that Rene didn't tell him about. But according to Rene, he was unaware that he had gotten a parking ticket. and for that even he apologized to Bob Holly, but Holly didn't have any of it and decided to take matters into his own hands. And at a house show in late 2004, Bob Holly teamed up with Charlie Haas to take on Rene Dupree and Kenzo Suzuki. And during the match, Bob Holly stiffed the hell out of Rene. He was laying it in inside the ring, and it didn't stop inside the ring. After the match, Rene ran back to the backstage, and Holly chased him to continue his beating and the punishment on 20 years old Rene Dupree. But afterwards, Bob Holly was fined $10,000 for that incident. During a training session on a 2003 episode of Tough Enough, as part of the training process, WWE brought in a wrestling veteran, which was none other than Hardcore Holly, Bob Holly, whatever. He was there to wrestle a practice match with the participants. And during the training match, out of nowhere, Bob Holly tagged himself in against Matt Capitale. And from there, things turned into an uncomfortable scene. In that match, Bob Holly delivered stiff kicks, forearms, and repeated strikes that drove Matt Capitale into the corner, and Bob Holly didn't stop. He continued with the stiff shots, and by the end of the session, Capitale has a swollen lip and a black eye, and he broke down in tears after the whole situation. According to Holly regarding that incident, he wasn't trying to injure Capitale, he was actually trying to teach the participants the reality of the business and how tough it is, and how physical it could be. But also he said in another interview that the reason behind the whole incident, that before the training session, he saw the participants laughing beforehand, especially Capitale, which indicated to him that they weren't taking the business seriously. But despite this whole fiasco, Matt Capitale went to win Tough Enough Season 3 alongside with John Morrison. But sadly, Capitale passed away in 2018 at the age of 38 after his battle with cancer. Well, this time Bob Holly was in the receiving end of his own medicine. During the September 12, 2002 episode of SmackDown, Holly was set to face Brock Lesnar. Well, the match started and was pretty stiff at times, but during a specific spot, Brock Lesnar attempted to perform a power pump, and while he's going for the move, it appeared that Holly didn't really go with it, and there has been a lot of speculation that Holly was sandbagging Lesnar. But regardless, in the middle of the move, Brock dropped Holly awkwardly on his head, and that caused him to break his neck in the process. And he was out of action for a year. And all over the years, Bob Holly dismissed the rumors that he was sandbagging Lesnar and believed that it was just an accident. He also said that Brock Lesnar apologized to him and called him in the hospital after the incident. And whether it was intentional or not, we've never heard Brock Lesnar's side of the story. If you're still watching to this point, make me hear you guys what you feel about these stories. And if you like my content, make sure to subscribe and like my videos, watch the previous ones. Thank you guys. Assalamu alaikum.